and there will be a 2-minute open for each candidate, and thereafter each candidate will have 1 minute to answer questions, and if Ms. Steib shows, we will have an opportunity at some point for them to question each other for 1 or 2 questions, and they will be allowed 1 minute closing remarks if both candidates are here. If not, we'll just have a press club with one of the candidates who's well known. Both of these people are community activists. Gary Chambers is, of course, well known in this area and in many other parts of the country based on his activism, and he is a person who has been, I think, to every forum at which he was invited, and we're pleased that he's here. So let's begin with you, Mr. Chambers. You have 2 minutes for your opening remark.
Good afternoon. My name is Gary Chambers. I am a native of Baton Rouge, proud to be. I think that it is important that I start by noting that John Kennedy has not showed up to one forum in this election. I think that the press should talk about that more. If you are a United States Senator of the 50th ranked state in the nation, you should be able to answer to the people that elected you. I have been an advocate in this community for years. Sometimes that has made people smile, sometimes that has made people frown, but nevertheless it has made our community, I think, discuss issues that are important, and it has helped us to address major issues. Our state ranks number 50 in the nation. We rank number 48 in education, 46 in healthcare, 47 in opportunity, 47 in the environment, 50 in crime, and I believe that we rank 50 in crime because we rank 47 in opportunity. A lot of folks have a lot of conversations about our cities. I think we have a beautiful state that has poor leadership that votes against the policies that would benefit the people of Louisiana. John Kennedy voted against infrastructure. Infrastructure isn't black, it isn't white, it isn't Democrat, it isn't Republican. Roads everybody use. That's $6 billion of resources that create jobs for the people of Louisiana. You may not agree with me on everything, but you won't have a senator that'll vote against the money that'll benefit the people of this state. I believe that we are in a real perilous time in this nation where we have to look at the leadership that we have and decide if we are going in the right direction. I believe 50 means that we're not in the right direction, which means that we need to change course. I'm on the ballot as the lead polling Democrat. We have the real opportunity to do this. When Kennedy was elected, he was elected with 536,000 votes. I don't think that that's a reflection of the perspective of the people of this state. That's just the people who got out to vote in that election because there wasn't a better option on the other side. I believe I'm a better option. I hope that we can talk about important issues today. Thank you.
And let's refrain from clapping until the end if we can, but we're pleased to have Syrita Steib here. She is a community activist in New Orleans by way of Vacherie. Her group is Operation Restoration. The way it works, Ms. Steib, you'll have 2 minutes for an opening remark, and then we will begin the question session. You'll have 1 minute to answer everything else beyond and a 1 minute closing. And at one point, we will ask each of you to ask each other a question, but you have 2 minutes. Syrita Steib.
Hi, how are you doing today? Thank y'all so much for having me. I apologize about my tardiness. I was at St. James High School this morning speaking to the students there, and it kind of ran over. So anytime I'm able to go back to Vacherie and lend a hand, that's what I've done. So I was there since 9 o'clock this morning, so I really apologize for my tardiness. But again, I appreciate being here. I am the founder and executive director of Operation Restoration in New Orleans, Louisiana. It's an organization that focuses on currently and formerly incarcerated women and girls and help them to transition into society after incarceration. I got involved in that work due to my own experiences with incarceration at the age of 19, and when I was released, there weren't many services that were provided for people out in the community. So I began to do work around access to education, access to employment, access to housing, because those are all of the things that I've struggled with. In 2017, I had an opportunity to work on some legislation which passed, which was Act 276, here in the state of Louisiana, which removed the criminal history questions off of college admissions applications. for purposes of admissions, because when I applied to go to school, I was unable to do so. We passed that legislation in 2017 here in the state of Louisiana, and we made Louisiana the first state in the country to pass that type of legislation. We've done it in 6 additional states since then, and I've worked on about 17 different pieces of legislation on the state and federal level. And my federal legislative work allowed me an opportunity to work under the last administration on the First Step Act, which resulted in me receiving a full presidential pardon on Donald Trump's last day in office, which removed my criminal convictions and my restitution. So I am honored to be here in conversation with you all today so we could begin to talk about issues and my experience, and I appreciate the time that we will spend together today. So thank you again for having me.
We will alternate as far as who answers the questions first, and since Gary went first with his opening statement, Syrita Steib will be first for this question. And the question that I have is, why are you running? And what distinguishes you not only from Senator Kennedy, but from the other Democrats? Ms. Steib?
You want to come back up to
Yes.
So I decided to run for the office of U.S. Senate about 3 years ago. I had an opportunity in the state legislature. I'm sorry, how much time? 1 minute? Had an opportunity to work in the legislature, and what I realized is that people who were currently in those offices were not invested in communities and were not invested in people. I think when we bring forth a piece of legislation in the work that I currently do, it's because it's informed by community and the needs that they have, and not all times do elected officials remember that their sole job is to support and bring forth legislation that the community wants. I think what distinguishes myself from the people that I am currently running against is that I am the only person in the race that has experience from day one to start creating policy, and also have the relationships that are needed and necessary on a federal level to begin to do those things from day one. I also have a history of working in multiple different capacities and being able to get things done and work with folks no matter what side of the aisle that they're on. So I think that's the distinction. Thank you.
I decided to run because our state ranks 50 in the nation, and no other Democrat that had a massive platform in this state was willing to run. I think that that has been a flaw of the Democratic Party. I think that we have not contested some of the biggest races in this state with candidates that can actually build momentum, and so we've proven that we can do it. I ran in the second congressional district last year. We blew away every poll that said we were going to come in at 6%. We took away 23.5% in that race. What separates me from my other Democratic opponents is I'm the only one of us who actually has a track record of running a race that has a base of voters, and I'm the lead polling Democrat that can motivate the base of the party. When John Kennedy was elected, 28% of black voters in New Orleans showed up, 32% of black voters in Baton Rouge showed up, and 28% of black voters in Shreveport showed up. You cannot win a statewide election as a Democrat if you cannot turn out the base of the party. We believe that we are the most equipped to be able to turn out the base of the party, and that's the difference maker between us and everybody else.
Gary, you'll stay there.
Yes, sir.
You have a question for your opponent.
Ms. Steib. You know, Ms. Steib and I get along real well because we the ones that show up to these forums and everybody else doesn't. So I will say to you, Ms. Steib, as someone who has shown up all over the state consistently to talk to voters, how do you feel as a candidate that John Kennedy, our senator, doesn't show up, and Luke Mixon, who's never held public office and never run for office, not showing up to the Baton Rouge Press Club today?
Well, thank you for such a loaded and hot question. I think that Senator Kennedy not showing up just continues to reinforce and show that he doesn't really care about the constituents of Louisiana. If it's not directly beneficial to him, he will not show up. He doesn't feel like he has to because nobody forces him to. As for Luke Mixon, I am actually surprised that he lives here in Baton Rouge and he did not take the time out of his schedule to make sure that he's here. There's nothing that could go on in Vacherie or the river parishes or a lot of places in this state where I don't show up and try to let people know that they are important to me and the things that they say matter, and I want to hear their voice and also introduce them to me. So I think that it is truly horrible that he's not here.
Do you have a question for Mr. Chambers?
Yes, Mr. Chambers, my question for you, and as he did say, we do have a pretty good rapport with one another. The thing that I want to know from you is, I think it's often questioned if you're serious about this and what does this race mean to you. So my question to you is, are you serious about the residents of the state of Louisiana, and how do we know that you have their best interests at heart?
I don't laugh unless something's funny, and I don't scratch unless I itch. My yes is yes and my no is no. I'm extremely serious about this because I've got a 12-year-old daughter named Zoe who attends public schools here in Baton Rouge. When I travel around the country and I see the parks in other communities and I see the amenities that they have, I want my daughter and your children to have those same amenities. When I see what we do with our tax dollars, it's laughable. When I see the foolishness that we do at the federal level, it's not productive. It doesn't help us move forward. Now, you may not think that my approach has been the most effective, but when I started, there wasn't an emergency room in North Baton Rouge. There is one today. When I started, there was a medical facility in Howell Place that was empty. It's full today. When I started, they were trying to move the zoo out of North Baton Rouge. It's there today, and they just did a $25 million investment. I'm extremely serious about helping people because our leaders have not.
Are there any questions at this point?
Flood insurance and homeowners insurance is a major issue for people here in Louisiana, especially as it's going to hit the river parishes as our coast starts to wash away. What are some ways that you would hope to tackle this issue and help us as the insurance rates continue to go up?
All right. Gary, I think you're first on this.
One, I think there's just a lot of red tape in the process that needs to be alleviated. When you have homeowners who are seeking assistance from the government, that process is not a clear process all the time. We need better communication from the federal level. That's half the battle. The other piece of it is we need a new insurance commissioner in Louisiana. Right? You can talk about the feds all you want to, but we have a terrible insurance commissioner, and if we want to do something to actually help the people in this state, we need to start by making a new insurance commissioner next year. Now, that's probably not what folks would expect a Senate candidate to say, but voters in this state are fed up with the rates, and that's not just a federal issue, that's a state issue, and we need to make sure that from a federal level that we're applying all the resources we can, that we're cutting the red tape, that we're making sure that people know the information and they're getting access, and that the resources are there, right? A lot of times when you look at Lake Charles is still in a condition like a hurricane just happened, and that was 2 years ago. Federal aid has not come to help those people swiftly enough, and we're not working with those local leaders to make sure that those things are happening. So there's a lot of conversations that have to happen, but the red tape, cutting the bureaucracy, and making sure that we're prioritizing people and electing a new insurance commissioner.
As someone who is currently in litigation with my insurance company due to the damage that I had in my home with Hurricane Ida, what I have learned is that a lot of these insurance companies that come into the state of Louisiana are able to write policies here because they specifically say that they specialize in writing policies in the Gulf Coast region. And if we have insurance companies that are saying that they specifically are able to write policies in the Gulf Coast region, but they can't make good on those policies, then they shouldn't be writing policies here. As Mr. Chambers mentioned, it is a state issue that our insurance commissioner, it falls under his purview. But as an elected federal official, we also have to take a stand to make sure that if people aren't making good on the policies that they're writing, that they are never able to write policies in these regions again. And that has to come down from the federal government. The federal government has to step in and we have to protect the states when the states are not protecting the constituents and making sure that they have access to the things that they need. It is not okay that insurance companies can go to different states and reinvent themselves and become leaders in writing policies in other states. So I think the job of the federal government is making sure that people who don't make good on their policies aren't unable to issue policies moving forward.
Now, your next bill. In his first term, Senator Kennedy had the opportunity to vote on 4 Supreme Court justice nominees. He voted for the confirmation of Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett, and against Ketanji Jackson. How would you have voted in those instances, Ms. Steib?
So I know I would have voted differently from him in 3 of the 4 times that he voted. There's one Supreme Court justice that he did vote for that I don't know enough information on. And the way that I research and I look at those things is looking at a history that they have. I know that Coney Barrett had no experience. I know that she should have never been confirmed. We all know Neil Gorsuch's history, and we all know that Ketanji Brown is overqualified for the position. So I think for me, really being able to be open-minded, admitting when you need to do more research on certain candidates, and also being able to stand and say that I would have been in total opposition to the way that he voted is a really easy question for me.
So Kavanaugh is the one you're uncertain about?
So Kavanaugh, I did not know at the time when he was being appointed the information about him. I know who Kavanaugh is now, and I know that I would have voted against Kavanaugh now. But at the time that Kavanaugh was brought up to be confirmed, I hadn't really heard enough about Kavanaugh at the time. Thank you.
Mr. Chambers.
I think everybody knows I voted against the 3 justices that John Kennedy voted for, and I certainly would have voted for Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. Justice Jackson has already started speaking on the court, and it has been impactful. I am curious to see the legislation that is unjust, or the case that is unjust, going before the Supreme Court about our district maps here in Louisiana, our congressional maps. Our Secretary of State here is trying to redefine the definition of black when we all know that historically if you had a drop of black blood in you, they called you black. But now today, Kyle Ardoin wants to have a case before the Supreme Court that would redefine black in the state of Louisiana so that if you are of mixed race other than white, you would no longer be considered black. I am curious to see how the justice will respond to that, because I know that she will bring justice in her conversation about it, because it is an unjust piece of legislation and deeply racist.
Okay. Bill?
If you are elected, will you accept donations from large PACs?
Okay. Gary?
Define large PACs.
NRA, medical, chemical, financial,
Not corporate PACs. We don't take money from corporate PACs.
corporate.
We don't take money from corporate PACs. We don't take money from corporate PACs in our campaign.
NRA?
No, the NRA wouldn't cut me a check. And I'm a gun owner.
So my question is, it depends on what PACs that would offer money. I also don't have the privilege of saying no, that I would turn down PACs because none have offered to support me, because people also know that I can't be controlled with donations. So if anybody thought that they would control me with a donation, that would be clear from the beginning that I would not accept it. I have shown up every single time. I'm principled. I stand in my principles and my beliefs. But I think for me, it depends on who and what the PAC is that is offering money, whether or not I would accept it.
Stay there. Robert?
Thank you. Could you give us a quick assessment of your take on the Ronald Green matter, and if you elected as U.S. Senator, what actions, if any, would you take with regard to that matter?
So currently right now, there are a few things that I can share. My organization, we are very involved in supporting the actual investigation of the Louisiana State Police into those matters currently. One of the things that my organization works on is police brutality, specifically as it relates to incarcerated and formerly incarcerated women and girls. We have been partners with the ACLU for a long time on this matter and other matters. I think as a U.S. Senate candidate, I would continue to do the things that I've always done, and it's to bring light, shed light, and fight and create legislation that addresses the issues at hand. We have to be able to push legislation that really identifies and uplifts people, and that people are human beings, specifically Black people, and how Black people are treated in this country. So I don't see the fight for me shifting or changing in any way, shape, or form. It's something that I get up and I do every day and will continue to do. And Ronald Green is someone who I already fight for daily.
I spoke with Miss Mona Hardin last week, Ronald Green's mother, because we put out a video last week showing the glaring situation in which we have in this case. I stood on the steps of the state capitol and spoke for Ronald Green. I've marched in protest for Ronald Green. From a legislative perspective or the perspective as a U.S. Senator, I'd be pushing for the Louisiana State Police to be under consent decree. We've had too many cases about Louisiana State Police over the last few years that have revealed to us that there's deep racism within the department, that there are actions that are unconscionable taking place by this department, and that is supposed to be the top law enforcement agency in the state of Louisiana. If that agency can't be trusted by the citizens of this state, then what police agency can? Because they investigate all of the local municipalities when something happens. Ronald Green is one glaring example, and the thing that I would challenge everybody else to ask is, if his name was Joe Burrow, how would you have felt?
Stay there, Jared. Chris?
I'd like to get your assessment of the current inflation rate that we're all dealing with right now, and what would you like to see done about it?
One, I wouldn't have been like John Kennedy and voted against the Inflation Reduction Act. He talks about inflation every single day as if he actually cares about helping the people of this state. He voted against infrastructure. Infrastructure dollars are going to help us create jobs. Jobs help us deal with inflation. The other thing is Exxon. Exxon in the last quarter, I think, had, what, a $17 billion profit in the process, while our gas rates were high as hell. The gas is high, the food is high, the wages are low, and the profits are high. I think that we have a real corporate greed problem in this country that we don't want to talk about, that is impacting inflation. I think we need to reduce taxes on lower class people and middle class folks in this country, and we need to make sure that people are paying their fair share at the top. And when we do that, we'll see a balanced economy. Trickle down economics doesn't work. We live in the 50th ranked state, and the majority of our state elected officials are Republicans. So how much are Republican policies helping the economy?
I agree that Inflation Reduction Act should have been voted on by Senator Kennedy, but I think that it's just a step. It's a start. It is not a end-all be-all to address the issues around inflation. Every so many years, it is something that we have to deal with that keeps coming up. As I travel the state, and the things that I've heard from people in northern Louisiana and all over the state is that we have become more of an importer of goods than an exporter. Louisiana has some of the richest soils here in the country, and we still have to go outside of Louisiana to bring in products that we know that we should be leading in. We have to take a leadership role in expanding energy in this state. We have to become a dual energy economy. I think you have some states that inflation, when it hits them really hard, and it's because they are not prepared and have any second tier employment opportunities, anything that needs to happen underneath. And I think that us here in this state, from a federal level in support, have to become more invested in making sure that we create opportunities inside of the state and keep our kids here, and that will definitely impact us being able to address inflation in the way that we should be responding to it.
All right, you can stay there. On the issue of abortion rights, the other major candidates have had changes of heart. One, a total change in John Kennedy, and one, a partial change in Luke Mixon. How do you stand on that, and are you open to changing your mind?
So not open to changing my mind. I've been very clear on how I feel about abortion rights. For myself, I always have said that I don't believe in abortion for myself as an individual because I've had struggles getting pregnant. I had to do IVF to have my daughter. I had 2 miscarriages. I would like to continue to stand in front of you and say that no matter what situation that I'm faced with, I could make the same choice. But I've never been pregnant with a product of incest or rape or a child that I couldn't take care of. I am definitely of the school that I cannot tell anybody else, just as anyone can't tell me what's best for me, tell me what's best for them. I am pro-reproductive rights. I have said I was pro-reproductive rights from day one. I will always be pro-reproductive rights because I do think that this overturning of Roe versus Wade is the tip of the iceberg. And the thing that I'm also concerned about is Greenwald versus Connecticut, because what I don't want is people inside of my hospital room as well. So definitely pro-reproductive rights, and that will never change.
If you can move back a little from the microphone next time, I think we can mitigate the crackling. Gary Chambers?
As a man, I should never be in the decision between a woman and her doctor. That is my personal belief. So I am pro-choice, always have been, always will be. Scripture says, for why am I being judged by another man's conscience? I think too often we spend a lot of times in people's bedrooms and in their personal decisions as a government, and we should stay out of it. I think the other thing is that it is a contradiction to say that you are pro-life while we have the death penalty, that you are pro-life and you are silent while people are killed by the police, that you are pro-life and we don't have adequate care for our children in our education system. If you pro-life, then there's a whole list of things that we should deal with as a society. We don't get to just check it off on one box. For me, I think that the other aspect of that is when you begin to limit the care that people can receive from their doctor, I think the government has gone a bridge too far. Kansas showed us that. My hope is that Louisiana does the same thing.
Ike?
Easy question. Regardless as to who wins and whether we have a Republican majority or a Democratic majority in the U.S. Senate, would you be supportive or opposed to expansion of the Supreme Court by a president who decided I need more members?
I think that the Supreme Court should be expanded. What Donald Trump did in his years in the White House is egregious. What the Republicans did in the last year of President Obama's term was egregious. If you are going to have the way that we do this be fair, then that's fine. But it has not been fair. We had one president who was black. While he was there, we denied him his right as a president to appoint a justice for an up or down vote. And then this same Senate leader goes in and does the same thing in reverse with a Republican president. I think in order to balance the court out and make sure that we have real justice, equal justice under the law for everybody, that the court should be expanded. And the court was not always 9 members. A lot of times we say, oh, we can't change these things. They were not always what they are. We absolutely can change them if they are unjust.
So yes, we'll definitely support expansion of the U.S. Supreme Court. I think it needs to go a step further. We need to be evaluating the process of how we are appointing justices to see should we be electing justices instead of appointing justices. We also need to look at not having to expand every 20 years or so, when things are unbalanced or they're not happening in a proper way, we need to begin to look at how do we stop the same thing from happening over and over and over again, and learning from the past. Every time that we've had to expand, it has been for this reason, because we needed to have a more balanced court. And if history has taught us nothing else, is that we will have it balanced for a particular amount of time, and then it will become unbalanced again, and then we need to expand. So I think we also need to invest in ways to ensure that we continuously have a balanced Supreme Court.
If you could stay there. Senator Kennedy voted to negate the election after the events of January 6th last year. How would you have voted on the election of 2020?
I would have voted to certify the election. The people spoke, but I think I would have been pushing for removing the Electoral College. That's what I would have been standing up and talking about from the past 2 elections. So definitely would have certified the election, no question.
I would have voted to certify the election. I think that everybody knows President Biden won the election. I think what John Kennedy did was dangerous. I think that John Kennedy is a con artist, and he spent a lot of time pretending he cares about police, but what about the 100+ police officers who were harmed at the Capitol that day because he was inside voting against a rightfully won election. And then he plays these little mystical games like, oh, well, I voted for Pennsylvania, I voted against Arizona, because he wants to be able to say, you know, I'm not as much of a quack job as the people who stormed the Capitol. But the truth is he plays right into that with his crackhead ads, with his race baiting, his dog whistling. John Kennedy has been an embarrassment to this state. And if we are not careful, people like Kennedy are putting this nation on the verge of a civil war. Whether we want to admit that or not, people storming the Capitol is a dangerous place for this country.
Chris?
What would you make of the president's performance in office so far, and is there anything at all that you would like to see him do?
You know, when I became a voter, I was an independent. I became a Democrat when I found out in order to vote for President Obama in the presidential primary, I had to be registered as a Democrat because we have closed primaries. President Biden was a part of that ticket, right? And so as a young voter, I was excited about who Joe Biden was, and I still have a great deal of admiration and respect for the president. I believe that the president has had some missteps, but I've also believed that the president has had obstructionists in his own party, as well as obstructionists on the other side. Washington is so divided right now that it prevents anybody from being able to be effective if we aren't willing to say, you know what, this is good policy, right? Like, it's not Republican, it's not Democrat, it just helps people. And we're not doing that right now. Republicans consistently stand in the way of this president getting the 60 votes. And to me, if we're not going to be willing to acknowledge that, then we're not being honest about the hurdles that the president has had in this process. He can't do everything by executive order. We need some cooperation from the other side as well.
So President Biden, for me, is forever tied to the 1994 crime bill. People often say that that is the bill that past President Clinton passed, but we often don't talk about President Biden being one of the authors of the bill. So for me, the measure by which he is successful is not only the things that he has done, and he's made some great first steps, but how he has rectified the past. And for me, I feel like that is where I need him to do better. I feel like that is where I need him to talk about and acknowledge this country's fascination with mass incarceration, and that it started with the 1994 crime bill. I think a good first step was the decriminalization of marijuana, but for me, when I heard that, I was like, who in federal prison is incarcerated for simple possession of marijuana? Like, I was in federal prison, nobody was there with that unless they were from DC or Puerto Rico. And in my mind, I knew immediately that didn't impact as many people as people thought. But I think it was a good first step to be able to start acknowledging that we needed to decriminalize marijuana. So I think he's done some great things, but I want him to do more.
All right, Stephen. Louisiana's led the nation in homicides per capita for 33 years consecutively. What would you do as a senator to address that issue?
Yes, we have led the country in homicides per capita for the last 33 years, but we've also led the country in incarcerating the most people per capita than anywhere in the world. And what we know is that incarceration is not the answer to stopping homicides. Investing in communities. I think public safety is economic investment. It is investment in education. It's investment in communities. It's investment in people. And that's where we have been missing. We haven't been making the investments in the proper place to negate and really impact public safety. But as a senator, I think that I would be in communication and conversation with the people who are actually running the state to see what it is that they need to do in order to pull down resources from the federal government to be able to support them in the endeavors that they need. But then also I'm a firm believer that every solution to every problem already exists in community. It is my job as an elected official to go into community and find those people with those solutions and give them access to the space that they can solve their own problems.
I agree with everything Ms. Steib said. In addition to that, you know, we rank 50 in crime, 47 in opportunity. That's not by coincidence. We spend a lot of time. Baton Rouge has 11 different police agencies. Did you know that? 11 different police agencies. We spend more money on policing in our city budget than almost anything else other than insurance benefits. Throwing money at police is not going to solve crime, because at the end of the day, we call cops after the crime what happens. If we're going to fix crime, we've got to make real investments in our communities. If you look at, for instance, how we allocate tax resources, I talk about this all the time. There was a tax plan in the early 2000s, the Green Light Plan. We spent $800 million in Baton Rouge and $45 million in North Baton Rouge. And 20 years later, we're looking at the decay in that community because we haven't made the investment in that community. We've got to find ways to take opportunities to build more community centers, more after-school programs, more jobs in our communities, so that we can get Pookies and Ray Rays off street corners and employed, because if you're working 12 hours a day, you're too tired to terrorize a community.
Gary, stay there. Would you?
I'm sorry.
Final statement?
You got another question?
Yeah, one question.
Well, we'll do one more.
All right, you had talked about how divided Washington is. What's your stance on the filibuster rule in the Senate?
I think we need to do away with the filibuster. It did not always exist. I think that it is a hurdle. Whether Democrats always say, well, when Republicans win, they'll be able to pass stuff. Well, that's the cost of winning an election, and Democrats need to focus on winning more elections if you're concerned about the other side getting power. I think that when we look at where we are as a nation, as far as being divided, when Bobby Kennedy was a U.S. Senator, he brought senators from all over the country to the Mississippi Delta and had a committee hearing in the Mississippi Delta. One of the things that I aspire to do when getting to the U.S. Senate is, whether you're Republican or a Democrat, whatever, I want to sit down and talk to you and bring you down to Louisiana and have committee hearings here on some of these issues so that we can have conversations. So if I don't have the ability to do away with the filibuster, I want to try to build relationships with people that we can get 2 or 3 things done that we agree on. For me personally, I think that the filibuster has been a hurdle to voting rights in the past. It was civil rights in the past, and it's something that has consistently stood in the way. And so I think we just need to do away with it.
The point about the filibuster not always existing is absolutely accurate. It was created specifically to stop civil rights legislation from passing, lynching legislation from passing. And I think that if we're going to do away with it, because we've also been able to use the filibuster for good, we have to have a plan in place. So I do agree with doing away with the filibuster, but I also agree in investing in making sure that when we do away with the filibuster, that we have an opportunity to also be able to leverage and mitigate the damages that could be done either way before we find ourselves in the same situations that we continuously find ourselves in when we try to eliminate something for good. But a lot of the things that are standing before us currently, the only way we're going to get them done and get them passed is if we do away with the filibuster.
Your final statement, 1 minute.
Well, I appreciated my time that I was able to spend here with you all today. I think that we have a real opportunity to do something different in this state. Louisiana has a history of people not showing up in elections to vote and send people home that we need to go home. We have to send John Kennedy home. He does not have the best interests of Louisiana in the forefront because he continuously shows up every single day and works against the state of Louisiana. Mr. Kennedy is a very intelligent person, even though he doesn't show up that way, and I think it is extremely dangerous that a person who has a law degree from UVA and Oxford has developed an accent that makes him seem unintelligent and also continues to get up and act in the way that he acts every single day. I think that is one of the most dangerous things that you could do. I do not like the way that he makes people in Louisiana look currently, because that is not who the people of this state are, and that I know who they are. So on November 8th, and I know early voting starts tomorrow, if you all are going out to the polls early, which I'm sure most of you in this room are, please vote number 12, and I am asking for your prayers, your support, and a lot of good energy. I'm the only woman out of 13 candidates on the ballot, and Louisiana has never elected a black woman to a statewide office in the history of this state, and we have an opportunity to change that. So again, I appreciate the time that you all spent with me today, and I hope that we can have a few more conversations before we leave. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you to the Press Club for having this conversation today. I think that it's important to the people of this state, as you get ready to go vote tomorrow, to recognize that your U.S. Senator does not show up for you. He does not show up to answer hard questions. He is not showing up for a single debate or forum in this conversation. And at bare minimum, you should send him to a runoff to make him answer some damn questions. For me, I believe that we are in a real situation in this state where we have put a lot of people back in office and they haven't done enough to earn their position there. I'm running against them because our children deserve better schools, we deserve better roads, we deserve a place that is as magical as our people. There's no place in the world that people treat you better, where you feel better than this place. I love it. I could go anywhere in the world and live, but I choose to live here. I choose to fight for here because I believe in the people of this state. If you believe in that, I'm asking you to show up and help me get to a runoff with John Kennedy, and I promise you it will not be disappointing.
All right, well, now we can thank you for appearing, taking all questions, and we'll be back next week, same time, same place. Thank you. All right.
We get to eat.
Sure, if you'd like to, sure.
Absolutely.
Sure. We need to make sure that we honor this guy back here. I'd love to have him on the radio.
That's a